At a busy outdoor cafe in downtown Atlanta, a racist woman publicly humiliates a calm, well-dressed black man with a slur. The moment silences the crowd until his quiet, poised response shifts everything. But just before he walks away, one small reveal changes how everyone sees him. "You people need to go back to Africa." The words sliced through the summer heat like a crack of lightning, loud enough to turn heads from several tables away. Napkins froze mid-air. Forks paused mid-bite. The bustling chatter of the cafe shrank into silence as eyes slowly turned toward the woman in the emerald pantsuit, arms crossed, lips curled with disgust, and the man she had just publicly targeted. He didn't move at first. He sat alone at the wrought iron table, wearing a crisp gray suit and dark tie, leather satchel resting by his feet, a glass of water in front of him, untouched. His skin was deep brown, smooth-shaven, and his eyes were calm but not cold. Just aware. He looked at her with a kind of silence that made people uncomfortable. Not weak, not afraid. Just still. "You heard me," she said louder, cheeks pink now, sensing the growing attention. "Why don't you people ever assimilate? Always walking around like you own the place." He finally blinked. "Is that what you think this is?" "Oh, don't try to turn it around," she spat. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 30 years. And people like you," he held up one hand, "you don't know me." That stopped her. The woman's face twitched. "Don't need to. I know your type." Loud, disrespectful, probably here on some handout. "Stop," he said quietly, and it landed louder than a scream. Several diners froze with tension. A young Latina waitress near the counter had tears welling in her eyes. Two older white men at the corner table shifted uncomfortably. No one was filming, not yet. But no one had the courage to speak either. The man finally stood. He wasn't tall, but he was built with quiet strength, shoulders steady, hands unclenched. He reached into his jacket slowly, and a few patrons braced without realizing it. But he didn't pull out a weapon, just a handkerchief. He calmly wiped the corner of his mouth, placed it back, and looked at the woman as if he were trying to remember something from a dream. "You asked where I'm from?" he said. She gave a dry chuckle. "Oh, now you want to talk. I was born in Jackson, Mississippi, raised by two teachers. My grandfather built houses in Greenwood. Never owned much. Never asked for charity." She rolled her eyes. "I went to law school in New York. Graduated with honors. You know why I'm here?" "Let me guess," she said. "To protest something?" He smiled faintly. "No, I was invited." "By the city. For a meeting about community redevelopment." A whisper rippled across the tables. He looked down, then back up. "And now I've spent the last 4 minutes defending my right to exist. In a place I pay taxes, in a suit I bought, with money I earned." The woman opened her mouth but couldn't find anything to say. He leaned closer, not aggressively, but just enough. "You don't know me, but I know you. The fear in your voice. That need to shrink someone else just to feel taller." She flinched. "See," he said, "you don't really want me to go anywhere. You just don't want to look in the mirror." The wind picked up softly. A napkin flew off a plate. He turned to the cafe manager, who stood stunned at the door. "Your staff has been professional. I'll still be attending my 2 p.m. meeting. But if this is the welcome your city offers, maybe we're not ready for progress yet." He picked up his SATCHEL, then paused. "I almost forgot," he said casually, pulling a small badge holder from his inner pocket. He flipped it open just long enough for the crowd to glimpse it. "Gold seal, Federal Eagle. My name's U.S. Attorney Charles H. Monroe. I don't often get time for lunch," he added. "But thank you for the unforgettable experience." He walked away slowly. No one said a word, not even her. The soft click of the hotel room door echoed behind him as Charles stepped inside, loosened his tie, and finally exhaled. He didn't slam anything. He didn't scream. He simply stood still. Then, quietly, he removed his suit jacket and laid it across the chair like his father used to, careful, deliberate, respectful of the fabric. The hotel room was modern but empty in that polished corporate way. Beige walls, chrome fixtures, a desk, a Bible in the drawer. He moved to the window. Atlanta shimmered in the afternoon heat. Glass towers, distant cranes, cars sliding down the highway like tiny reflections of the larger world. He sipped cold water and closed his eyes. Mississippi. 1987. He was 7 when he saw his mother get spit on outside the grocery store. Not because she'd said anything. She hadn't even made eye contact. But the man in overalls had stepped out of his truck, muttered something about uppity women, and spit. Right on her cheek. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She wiped it away with her sleeve, looked down at Charles and said, "We're not here to fight pigs, baby. We're here to buy bread." That was the moment Charles learned what armor looked like. Years later, his father, a quiet man who built houses by hand and read Baldwin by lantern light, sat him down after school. "They won't see you," he said softly. "Not really. They'll see what they expect. You're either a threat or a servant. Sometimes both. That's the box they give you." Charles asked, "How do I break out of the box?" His father smiled, eyes heavy with something more than exhaustion. "You don't. You just build something bigger around it. Sooner or later, they notice." That night, Charles started reading his father's law books. Not because he understood them, he didn't, but because they made his father's voice echo longer in the room. By 16, he could quote court cases most law students skipped. By 23, he was delivering lectures on civil code to judges twice his age. But none of that erased the sting of a as modest than was verities did not erase the sting of a tendesura. He was delivering lectures on civil code to sending his soul tianden lectures on civil code to singing them at the erase the sting of a erase the sting of a woman in a cafe telling him he didn't belong. The same woman who hadn't asked his name. The same crowd who watched like it was a spectacle. He opened his laptop. Emails. Dozens. Some from City Hall confirming the redevelopment meeting. One from the mayor's office. One from the Department of Justice with a short subject line, "Need an update." He didn't reply. Instead, he scrolled through news clips, just background on the project. Midtown zoning, low-income housing, historical landmarks, noise complaints from gentrified districts. Nothing new. Until he paused on one photo. It was her. The woman from the cafe. He zoomed in. There she was at a public zoning meeting last year, nameplate clearly visible. Judith Crane. Midtown Beautification Committee. Of course. Charles rubbed his temples. It always circled back. Power disguised as civic pride. Bigotry wrapped in bylaws. He thought about skipping the 2 p.m. meeting. But then he remembered his mother's face outside that grocery store. No tears. Just steel. Across town, a glass-paneled conference room buzzed. City officials shuffled papers, checking the agenda. Councilman Darnell leaned into his assistant. "Monroe's still coming?" "Yes, sir. His aide confirmed it 10 minutes ago." Darnell smirked. "Good. The press will be here." From the other end of the room, a city liaison whispered, "I heard he shut down a federal investigation into Eastland Correctional in 6 weeks. No leaks, no press." Another voice chimed in, "And I heard he doesn't speak much, but when he does, people resign." Darnell rolled his eyes. "Let's not make him out to be Moses. It's just a meeting." But even he kept checking the time. One of the interns, young, unsure, trying not to show it, asked nervously, "What's he look like?" Someone replied from behind a folder, like someone you'd overlook, until it's too late. Back at the hotel, Charles adjusted his cuffs, straightened his tie, and looked in the mirror. Not at the wrinkles. Not at the worry. At the man his father had helped shape. At the man his mother never let break. He picked up the same badge Judith Crane had seen earlier. This time, he didn't tuck it away. The door to the Midtown Civic Center creaked open at exactly 1:57 p. M. Charles walked in without fanfare, just his gray suit, polished shoes, and the same satchel. But this time, the room didn't carry on as usual. It slowed, quieted, watched. City officials looked up from their papers. Whispers darted through the corners like shadows. That's him. He's already here. Heard he lit someone up downtown earlier. Heard it was Judith. Charles took his seat calmly at the long mahogany table. Directly across from him sat Judith Crane. Her mouth was pressed into a stiff, practiced smile. Her makeup was fresh. Her eyes were not. She didn't speak. Neither did he. The mayor's assistant, trying to maintain control, cleared her throat. Let's call today's session to order. We're here to discuss funding and zoning implications for the proposed redevelopment project in Midtown led by our federal liaison, Mr. Charles Monroe. He stood, a slight nod. Thank you. He didn't open a folder. Didn't pull up slides. He simply looked around the room and let silence work for him. Judith looked away first. I spent the morning walking your neighborhoods. He began. I counted 27 boarded windows. 11 properties marked for demolition. 4 with visible eviction notices still taped to the doors. He let that settle. Yet the proposal submitted to my office only mentions noise complaints, dog parks, and sidewalk upgrades. The mayor shifted in his chair. Charles continued, voice low but unmistakably firm. If the objective is aesthetic improvement, perhaps we should begin by asking why your most vulnerable citizens are being priced out, not painted over. Someone coughed. A few heads lowered. To their notepads, Charles returned to his seat. He didn't need applause. He needed ears. 3 blocks away, in a quiet office above a smoothie shop, a college student named Tasha sat staring at her phone. She had been at the cafe that morning 2 tables over. She hadn't spoken, hadn't filmed, hadn't moved. But after the man walked away, she found herself trembling, not with fear. With shame. She'd gone back through her phone hoping to find something, anything. She didn't have footage of the full incident, but she did have one still image. It was blurry but powerful. Charles standing tall. Judith's face mid-expression, and behind them, a sea of stunned white faces, paused. Mid-chew or mid-sentence, caught in their silence. She uploaded it to Twitter with one line. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just stood, and the whole cafe froze. The post began to spread. Then spiraled. By 2:12 p.m., it had over 10,000 RETWEETS. By 2:20. The hashtags #WhoIsHe and #Midtown Attorney were trending locally. No names. Just a symbol. Back in the conference room. A small moment went unnoticed by most, but not by Charles. As the next council member began speaking about district boundaries. The young Latina server from the cafe quietly slipped into the back row. She didn't make a sound. She just stood near the door, holding a paper cup in her hand, a fresh coffee with a note taped to the lid. You were the only one who spoke with grace. Thank you for showing us how. Charles saw her. She didn't wave. She didn't interrupt. She just bowed her head and left. He tucked the cup beside his notes. A small symbolic moment, gentler than the morning's violence, yet echoing louder in his mind. Outside the conference building, Judith Crane's assistant was frantically refreshing her phone. It's going viral, she whispered. That cafe thing. It's him. Judith didn't respond. Her fingers tapped the table as she stared at nothing. After the meeting adjourned, several members lingered behind, hoping to speak with Charles. Some offered business cards. Some just said, Thank you. But not everyone. Too. Men in suits watched from a distance, eyes narrowed. One of them muttered, "He's making it political." The other nodded. And dangerous. They didn't mean violence. They meant disruption. They meant power they couldn't predict. They meant him. Back at the hotel, Charles sat down and finally opened the Twitter link someone had texted him. Anonymously. He saw the image and the caption. Closed his eyes, not out of vanity or pride, but weariness. He hadn't come to be a symbol. But sometimes the fire finds the match. The email came at 8:32 m. Subject: Formal complaint, Midtown incident. Filed by Judith Crane, submitted to City Ethics Committee, CCDDOJ Liaison. Allegation: intimidation, unprofessional behavior, and verbal misconduct by Mr. Charles Monroe. Charles didn't even blink when he read it. He had seen this tactic before many times. The cornered opponent reaching not for facts, but for fog. Confuse the record. Muddle the memory. Rewrite the story before the ink dries. His phone buzzed. This time, it was DC, a curt message from his superior. Heard about the incident. Need clarity before press asks. Charles typed back one sentence. Come to the meeting today. Bring a pen. Judith sat across from the city committee at 10 a.m. sharp. Her tone was clipped. Her words calculated. I felt unsafe, she said, clutching her handbag. He approached me aggressively. He disclosed his federal badge in a public space, in a way that, frankly, felt threatening. And there were witnesses. Did he threaten you directly? A board member asked. Judith hesitated. No, she admitted. But it was the way he said things. The posture, his tone. Another board member scribbled notes without looking up. And you said all this occurred before the meeting? Yes, at a cafe. Did you address your concerns during the session? Judith pressed her lips tight. I didn't want to escalate it further, but I refused to be intimidated into silence. 30 minutes later, Charles walked into the room. No lawyer. No aid. No statement. Just a black binder tucked under his arm and a worn expression carved from years of restraint. Mr. Monroe, said the chair, you're aware of the complaint? I am. Would you like to respond? Charles didn't raise his voice. He didn't lean forward. He simply opened the binder and removed a single page, then passed it across the table. It was the transcript of a cafe's security footage, obtained overnight by request. On it, Judith's words, her tone, her slur, his silence. His response, no edits, no drama. Just time-stamped truth. One committee member's pen slowed to a stop. I also have statements, Charles added calmly, from 3 witnesses, 2 patrons, 1 employee. All corroborate the events verbatim. One even described Ms. Crane's tone as agitated and racially inflammatory. Her words, not mine. Judith paled. Charles continued. I understand. Public pressure makes people nervous. I understand when the optics shift, the story shifts with it. He turned to her, but not cruelly. But no part of my job requires me to absorb abuse to spare someone else embarrassment. Judith opened her mouth, then closed it. No one rushed to defend her. Outside the meeting, local reporters had begun gathering. The cafe incident was now part of a news cycle. The photo of Charles standing tall, eyes calm, had been reposted by 3 national journalists. A headline buzzed on the screen above the courthouse lobby. Go back to Africa, woman accuses federal attorney, but receipts tell a different story. Inside, the DOJ rep who had flown in from D.C. approached Charles. You handled that without breaking a sweat, she said, shaking her head. You knew she'd try something. I didn't know, he replied. But I hoped I'd be ready. She paused, then added, they're watching, Charles. And not just the haters. Everyone. Every young black lawyer who ever got told to smile more or speak less. He nodded, shoulders heavy but square. I'm not here to be a symbol, he said quietly. She smiled. Too late. Later that afternoon, Judith sat alone in her office, blinds drawn. Her inbox was flooded not with support, but backlash. Her committee chair had called to review her role. A neighborhood group issued a public apology on behalf of the district. She wasn't fired, but she felt it. The unraveling had begun not with screams, not with protest, with truth. With restraint and a binder full of facts. Back in the hotel, Charles received a letter slid under his door. Handwritten. I used to think dignity was weakness. Today you made me rethink everything. A stranger who was listening. He folded it carefully, tucked it inside the same binder and left it there not as a trophy, but as a reminder that even quiet power echoes. The auditorium at West End Community College wasn't glamorous. Flickering lights, folding chairs, a podium with chipped paint. But every seat was full. Local law students, city interns, young organizers. Even a few seasoned council members lingered quietly in the back row, trying not to be noticed. They'd all come for one reason, not because they were told to. Not because there was press, but because word had spread, he's not like the others. Charles stood at the front, sleeves rolled to his forearms, blazer off. No stage tricks, no booming voice. Just quiet command. I wasn't going to speak. Today, he said. But someone reminded me last night, when the room gets quiet, someone has to be brave enough to break the silence. He scanned the crowd. No notes. No slides. I want to tell you a story. When I was 19, he began, I interned at a firm in New York. Big office. Marble floors. Everyone moved like they were late for something. I was the only black intern on the floor. Someone in the second row nodded slowly. One day I went into the break room to get coffee. Another associate walked in, didn't look at me, and asked if I could clean up the table. I said sure. He handed me a napkin and said, there's still crumbs. Laughter rippled awkwardly. I wiped it down. Then I walked back to my cubicle. He let the pause sit. 3 weeks later, that same associate had to brief me on a case, because I was second-chairing the lead counsel. Now the room was dead still. Charles smiled faintly. He didn't recognize me, not because I was invisible, but because he never really looked in the first place. More nods. A few students leaned forward, eyes wide. Some people will always see you as the help, he said, until you're the one holding the pen that decides their future. Backstage, the college dean watched from the shadows. She whispered to her assistant, he's not just brilliant, he's safe. Her assistant frowned. Safe? She clarified, he doesn't burn the room, he warms it. And somehow you leave feeling braver. As the session ended, no one clapped immediately. They just stood, some in awe, some blinking back tears. A few, especially the young black students, stood. The longest then the applause came, quiet at first, then fuller, louder, but Charles didn't linger. He nodded once, packed his notes, and headed for the back exit. That's when someone stopped him. A man in a tailored suit. Late 40s, silver lapel pin. Slight accent. I'm not here on behalf of the city, the man said. I'm with a coalition of state prosecutors. We've been watching. Charles raised an eyebrow. Off the record, the man added. What? You did this week? That's not just reputation management. That's transformation. Charles said nothing. The man extended a card. When you're ready, he said. There are rooms you belong in that you haven't even walked through yet. Charles took the card. Didn't promise. Didn't decline. Just nodded. Back at City Hall. Judith Crane sat in a closed-door session. Her voice was low now, not out of shame but fear. I didn't know who he was, she whispered. I didn't know it would turn into all this. One council member leaned in sharply. That's the problem, Judith. You didn't want to know. She looked down at her hands. No reply. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Charles returned to the same cafe acute. Same table. Same drink. No crowd this time. The waitress approached, same one from before. Her hands were steady now, confident. This one's on the house, she said. My manager said you're good for business. Charles chuckled softly. He took the glass. And for the first time that week, he let himself breathe, not as a lawyer, not as a symbol. Just as a man. The cameras blinked. Red. 3 angles. 2 microphones. 1 broadcast feed. The moderator cleared his throat nervously. Welcome to tonight's Midtown Community Town Hall, where we'll be discussing recent redevelopment proposals and the growing public conversation about race, leadership, and accountability. Behind him, a live audience sat shoulder to shoulder. City officials, students, reporters, staffers. Judith sat to the right of the moderator. Charles sat to the left. 2 chairs. One truth between them. Judith spoke first. She had rehearsed. It's been a difficult week, she began, her voice smooth. There have been many misunderstandings. I want to clarify that I never intended to create discomfort or divide the community. I believe we all want what's best. Charles listened without blinking. She continued. This conversation shouldn't be about personal drama. It should be about development, about data, about preserving the integrity of our neighborhoods. Murmurs from the audience. Then the moderator turned. Mr. Monroe? Charles adjusted the microphone slightly, then said, Nothing. 5 seconds. 10. 15. He looked at Judith. Then the crowd. Then the moderator. I agree, he said finally. This should be about integrity. Judith straightened slightly. But integrity, Charles continued, doesn't begin with zoning maps. It begins with how you speak to people when you don't know their title. The air thickened. A few people shifted in their seats. It begins, he said slowly, when you're caught off guard. When you think no one's listening, no reporters, no hashtags. Just your instincts. Judith forced a smile. We're not here to relitigate a personal encounter. Charles leaned forward just slightly. I'm not here to relive it either. I'm here because you filed a false complaint when I didn't match your expectation. Because you feared correction more than you feared being wrong. Now there was no noise. Not even breathing. He turned toward the audience. Let me ask you something. How many of you have been mistaken for something less than what you are? Few hands went up. Then more. Then dozens. Charles nodded. That's not personal drama. That's design. Backstage, a producer whispered to her supervisor, We need to clip this segment. This'll go viral in under an hour. On stage, Judith's mask cracked. I made a mistake, she said, voice tightening. I said something ... regrettable, but you're turning this into a spectacle. Charles tilted his head. No, he said calmly. I'm turning it into a mirror. Then he reached into his satchel, pulled out a folder, thin, just 1 sheet. Inside, he slid it across the table. This, he said, is a list of minority-owned businesses removed from the redevelopment contract in the last 2 years. Half of them didn't even know they'd been cut. Gasps from the crowd. Judith didn't touch the paper. This, Charles added, isn't about me. Or you. It's about the systems you quietly maintain when you think no one is watching. In the back row, a city councilwoman texted her chief of staff. He just ended her. Gracefully. The moderator cleared his throat. Do either of you have closing remarks? Judith stared at the table. Charles nodded once. I believe in accountability, he said, but I also believe in redemption. What I don't believe in what? I can't believe in Ziz pretending the wound isn't there just because the bleeding stopped. The applause started slow. Then it spread. Even some of Judith's peers clapped. Awkwardly, hesitantly, because they knew it wasn't just applause. It was acknowledgement. After the cameras cut, a man from the press approached Charles. That line, "About the mirror," he said. "That was off script?" Charles shrugged. "The script," he replied, "was written in her silence." Judith left through a side exit. No words. No statement. No eye contact. Just the weight of a confrontation she never truly prepared for. 3 days later, the ballroom at the Atlanta Civic Center buzzed with anticipation. Banners fluttered above the stage. Southeast Regional Justice Summit. Equity through law. Power through truth. Charles stood backstage in a navy blue suit. Same satchel. Same stillness. Only now, the room beyond was packed with over 700 attorneys, judges, advocates, and journalists. Some had flown in just for him. The town hall clip had crossed 1 million views. The line, "I'm not turning this into a spectacle, I'm turning it into a mirror," was already quoted in editorials, campus chalkboards, even protest signs in nearby cities. But Charles didn't want to trend. He wanted to teach. Host stepped forward to introduce him. "Our next speaker has become a name many of you already know. But what you may not know is that he once clerked for the Southern District with a desk no bigger than a cafeteria tray. He's quiet, focused, and most dangerously, he's honest." Laughter. Applause. "Please welcome U.S. Attorney Charles Monroe." Charles stepped up to the mic slowly. He didn't flash a smile. He didn't adjust his cufflinks. He just waited for the room to settle. It didn't take long. Then he began. "I'm not interested in going viral," he said. "I'm interested in going deep." That line alone silenced even the clicking of pens. "I didn't come here to talk about a cafe, or a viral photo, or a town hall debate. I came here to talk about what happens when the law forgets who it's supposed to serve." He paused. "You want to know what systemic racism looks like? It's not just slurs. It's budgets. It's silence. It's the way an agenda gets printed without our names on it. A few murmurs of agreement. I've watched. Black firms get denied contracts because their branding wasn't clear. I've watched. Indigenous communities get promised water and receive a press release instead." He looked across the room. "You know what power is?" he asked softly. "Power is when you don't have to yell, because the room's already listening." In the front row, an elder judge, one of only 3 black justices in the state, nodded with tears in his eyes. "Power," Charles continued, "is when you teach your child how to keep their hands visible when they're pulled over, not because it's in the Constitution, but because it's in the air." The room didn't applaud yet. They couldn't. They were holding their breath. Then Charles shifted tone just slightly. "But I'm not here to scold you," he said. "I'm here to remind you. You don't need to go viral to make change. You need to go consistent." He gestured toward the back. "There's a woman in this room. Her name is Gloria. She's been filing housing discrimination cases since 1996. She's never been interviewed, never been quoted. But last month, she helped a mother keep her home after a bank tried to ghost her lease." All heads turned. A surprised woman near. The catering table flushed red, trying to hide. Charles smiled. "That's what legacy looks like. Quiet wins, long fights. Small doors kicked open for someone else." Now the applause came, not loud, but steady, after the summit. As Charles moved toward the hallway, people tried to pull him for interviews, photos, quotes. But he stepped aside. Found Gloria and shook her hand. "I meant every word," he said. She laughed, a little overwhelmed. "No one's ever thanked me from a podium before." "They will now," Charles replied. That evening, the clip of his speech began circulating, but not just in legal circles. Teachers, shared it in classrooms. A nonprofit added it to a leadership training series. One civil rights museum requested permission to display the team speech permanently. Charles didn't watch any of it. He just sat in his hotel room with the curtains open, watching the city lights shimmer. And for the first time in days, he smiled. Not for the camera. Not for the crowd. Just for himself. At Midtown City Hall, a memo circulated quietly through the inboxes of every department head. Subject: Equity Audit Initiative. Immediate action required. Inside a single sentence underlined the shift. Review all community-facing contracts for racial bias and representation by end of quarter. No press release. No cameras. Just change. At the same cafe where it all began, a sign appeared on the wall near the counter. We believe in dignity, not silence. The font was hand-drawn. No logos, no names, but every employee signed it. Even the owner. Even the woman who didn't speak that day. On the third floor of city planning, a janitor named William paused outside a newly renamed meeting room. It used to be called Room 3B. Now it read, Monroe Room, reserved for discussions. That matter. He stared for a long moment, then whispered to no one in particular. Guess people were watching. Charles hadn't asked for any of it. He had returned to his usual routine casework. Field reports, late nights reading depositions. No press junkets, no interviews. When a major media outlet requested a documentary series, he declined with 3 words: I'm still working. But that didn't stop the ripple. At a neighborhood high school, a history teacher handed out a writing prompt. Describe a time you saw someone change the world without raising their voice. Half the class wrote about Charles Monroe. One student, Jameer, 14, often dismissed for being too quiet, read his piece aloud. He didn't yell. He didn't throw a chair. He just made people stop pretending. Elsewhere, a small nonprofit updated their boardroom wall. They painted a mural of faces, dozens of them. Diverse, strong, poised. At the bottom, in clean lettering, Legacy. Isn't volume, it's visibility. Inside Charles's office, a stack of letters had started forming. Not fan mail, but gratitude. Some typed, some scribbled. Some folded inside crayon-colored envelopes from children. One simply said, You gave my dad courage. Another, Thank you for showing my son how to walk into rooms that weren't built for him. He didn't respond to most, but he kept everyone. In a box marked Echoes. One afternoon, while leaving a meeting at the Department of Justice, Charles was stopped by a young black attorney, nervous, sweating slightly. Sir, she said, I was at the summit. Charles nodded, ready to thank her, but she interrupted, voice trembling slightly. I applied for a job in a firm where no one looks like me. I was going to withdraw. Then I saw your town hall video. I watched it 6 times. Charles didn't say much, just rested a hand on her shoulder and said, Then send that application. And don't just walk through the door on it. She nodded, blinking fast, and turned away before the tears came. Meanwhile, the city council quietly adopted a new code of conduct. A small clause added under verbal standards in public discourse. It stated, No person shall be addressed by references to race, origin, or stereotype during official meetings, public or private, under threat of removal. They didn't announce it on television. But it was passed unanimously. Judith Crane abstained. And the next week, she resigned. No press conference. No apology. Just a letter stating irreconcilable differences and the desire to spend more time with family. As for Charles, one morning he arrived at his office early. Hallway was quiet. The air is still, and taped to his door no signature, no decoration, was a sheet of notebook paper. On it, scrawled in bold Sharpie, You changed everything, just by staying calm. He folded it once, tucked it in his inner pocket, and went to work. The headlines dropped like a thunderclap. U.S. Attorney under scrutiny for unverified credentials. Anonymous DOJ source questions Monroe's conduct. Midtown hero or master manipulator? It wasn't local press anymore. This time it was national cable panels, morning shows, whispered blog posts written in slippery language. Some say he's been too quiet for too long. Others suggest he's weaponizing dignity for political gain. Charles stood at his kitchen, counter-reading the article. He didn't blink, didn't mutter. He just exhaled slowly, then folded the paper and placed it beside his coffee at City Hall. Former critics now turned supporters hesitated. He should make a statement. Maybe step down for a while at least until this clears. We've seen this playbook before. Tear down the symbol before he gets too high. Even Gloria, the housing rights advocate, called to ask, "Are you okay?" Charles answered calmly, "It was never about my comfort." But that night, alone in his hotel room, Charles stared at the ceiling longer than usual. The room was quiet, except for one thought repeating like a drumbeat. They won't stop at humiliation. They want erasure. He got up, poured water, sat at the desk, opened a folder. Inside was every credential, certification, federal appointment order. All dated, all signed. He didn't need to prove anything, but they were going to make him anyway. The next morning, the Justice Department issued a formal statement. "We have full confidence in U.S. Attorney Charles Monroe. All credentials and clearances have been verified without question." Still, the noise didn't stop. A prominent columnist wrote, "Even if Monroe's record is clean, the optics are too dangerous. He's become polarizing maybe without meaning to." Charles smiled at that one. Without meaning to. At a press conference scheduled originally to announce a new civil rights investigation, a reporter hijacked the moment. Double quotes, "Mr. Monroe, are you planning to resign?" He looked at her, eyes level. "No." She flinched at the flatness. "No," he repeated. "I don't resign when I've done nothing wrong. I don't disappear just because someone else is uncomfortable with my presence." A few cameras zoomed in. He leaned into the podium. "You wanted the quiet black man who'd stay in his box. You didn't mind my resume until it came with a spine." Backstage, a White House liaison whispered to an aide, "We can't ignore him anymore." Later that day, Charles returned to his office to find his window had been cracked by a small thrown rock. Taped to it was a note. "Your calm is fake. We see through you." He read it once. Then slowly took it down, filed it in the same box as the letters of thanks. Same space, different weights, but he wouldn't give it the dignity of display. That night, a knock came at his hotel room door. It was Gloria. No words, just a hug, tight, fierce. He almost broke then. Almost. She whispered, "You're not alone." That one sentence held him steady. The next day, a group of black attorneys launched a letter of support, signed by over 200 law professionals across the country. Published. Headline: "We stand with Charles Monroe because we've all been him." One line read, "They tried to break him because he didn't break first." At the DOJ, a senior official offered to let him take a leave of absence. Charles declined. "I didn't ask for the fight, but I'm not leaving it unfinished." And so, the story didn't end with vindication. It didn't end with cheers or revenge. It simply kept going, because survival wasn't the goal anymore. Staying visible was, even when the fire rose, even when the system snarled, even when the final strike came. He stood. Unshaken. The invitation came in a white envelope. No gold trim, no fanfare. Just 7 words. "You are cordially invited. Midtown Justice Center dedication." Charles didn't respond for 3 days. He wasn't sure he wanted to go. But then Gloria called and simply said, "It's not for them. It's for us." So he packed the same satchel, wore the same gray suit, and walked into the same building where years earlier silence greeted him like a threat. This time, it welcomed him like a mirror. The crowd inside the newly renamed Charles H. Monroe Justice Center was small by design. Former students, young attorneys, community leaders, even a few of the old doubters quiet now, maybe wiser. The mayor stepped up first. "There are men who shout for power," she said. "And there are men who make power quieter." Charles did that. He didn't demand justice. He reminded us we'd forgotten it. Light applause. Then Gloria stepped up. He never yelled, never bragged. But somehow, my inbox is now full of students saying, "I want to be like him." She chuckled. I say, "Good luck catching up." Finally, they called Charles forward. He didn't carry notes. He didn't look for applause. He just placed his hand on the podium and said one sentence. "They tried to reduce me to a moment, but we became a movement." Then he stepped back. Room stood in silence, the kind that says we understand after the ceremony. Charles slipped away. No press. No selfie requests. Just one final walk down Midtown streets that once turned their back on him. At the cafe, he paused. Same table, same chair, but something had changed. On the wall, framed behind the counter, was a still image from years ago, the original viral photo. Him standing, Judith sitting, but beside it now, a new image. Same cafe acute. Same spot, only this time, a young black boy in a suit, holding a book and smiling at the camera. Underneath, handwritten. He walked in silence, so we could speak. Charles stared for a long moment, then took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time, he sat down without tension. 10 minutes later, a young man approached, maybe 20. "I am a law student, nervous." "Sir," he said, "do you mind if I sit with you?" Charles gestured to the empty chair. The young man hesitated, then added, "I don't know what to say. Just, thank you." Charles nodded. "Then say that. And mean it. And then pass it forward." They sat quietly. No headlines. No cameras. Just a passing of something greater than words. A few months later, an article would quote a new city leader. "We don't run meetings the same way anymore. Not since Monroe." Another, "He taught us how not to flinch." And somewhere in a school across town, a teacher read aloud from a lesson titled "Moments That Changed Cities." Charles Monroe's name was listed next to words like dignity, persistence, and legacy. In his office, now filled with plaques and photos and 2 small plants he always forgot to water, Charles kept one frame on his desk. Not the awards. Not the Justice Center plaque. Just a folded piece of notebook paper behind glass. "You changed everything. Just by staying calm." He didn't smile every day. He didn't forget what they tried to do, but every time he walks into a room now, they stood a little straighter, spoke a little slower, listened a little longer. Because now they knew asterisk.